Once again, video games and WWE has crossed paths, and there's been a lot of controversy that coming up on this episode of Keepin' It 100.
No, baby, that's for somebody else. We're just gonna keep you right where you're at right now.
It doesn't matter what you think.
The Wrestling Wrealm presents Break It Down with Brian H.
Hello, ladies and gentlemen, welcome to this episode of Break It Down with Brian H. Keeping It 100. I'm your host, Brian H. Waters, as you can see right there on your screens. This show, of course, is brought to you by the Wrestling Wrealm. If you haven't done so, go ahead, hit the subscribe button. I'll go ahead and throw that on the screen for you right there. You follow us on Instagram and Twitter at Wrestling Wrealm. Like us on Facebook. Subscribe down below right here on YouTube. And if you happen to be listening to in your cars or while you're out around the house, go ahead, drop a 5-star review on Apple. Hit the follow button on Spotify, Google, Stitcher, iHeartRadio, Pandora. So let the people know, folks. Let them know. Folks, like I said at the top, video games. Undertaker and Xavier Woods, they don't see eye to eye on video games. Yeah, you can see right there in a great picture, Kofi Kingston's in this picture, but the show's not about him, so I cropped him out. We see that those two recently, the Undertaker was on the Joe Rogan podcast, and he talked about this. Of course, this was towards the end of the show. So, and how do I know? Because I scrubbed through the whole show. That way, I would know what I was talking about. I didn't want to just come on here like a lot of podcasters do, and they just give their opinion without doing their full research. Y'all forgot, this is what I was trained to do. Study this. So, because a good journalist would do his homework, that's what I did. And I listened to what the Undertaker was saying. Because remember, you can read words, but if you don't hear it, you don't get the full explanation. You don't get the full meaning. So the Undertaker talked about how the locker room is soft. And he blamed it on the fact that everybody got old around the same time. What does he mean? So when you think about him, you think about him, The Rock, Austin, Triple H, a lot of people can't let the Attitude Era go. Let's be real. A lot of people, maybe some of you listening and watching, can't let the Attitude Era go. Even they had this guy who was the wingman for Joe Rogan, and you could clearly tell he was an Attitude Era kid. I'm going to be honest with you. He was very upset about the fact that they aren't over-sexualizing the women. So I was like, oh, you must be somebody who just can't get a girlfriend. But neither there nor here, because he was like really upset about this. But one of the things was he was talking about the fact that back in the day, you know, they had an edge. Then he said, you know, nowadays in the locker room, they're worried about playing video games. And that's what really set people off. The fact that the Undertaker, how dare he say those were the days, right? How dare he say that? Undertaker's not supposed to say nothing like that. But yeah, he said it. He said those were the days that, you know, he even talked about being, you know, back in the day, you had to have respect and common courtesy. You can't just step foot in the locker room, right? You had to make sure you knew what you was doing. Because they would let you know if you wasn't about that life, you found out. So he was basically saying it was a tough man. Anybody just couldn't be in there. Well, and the fact that he mentioned video games and said this is what it's all pretty and everybody is, and he said some other things that I'm going to get to. But the fact that he mentioned that, of course, like I said, quote goes viral. So what happens after that? WWE's biggest video game ambassador replied on Twitter. Yes, Xavier Woods. His tweet, I wouldn't be the person I am without the guidance and lessons of a few key people from the previous generation of wrestling. They taught me about the business to save my money and that having video games in the locker room is healthier than, in quotation marks, or in parentheses or brackets, redacted. Thank you, guys. Now, everybody knows back in the day, there was always the talk about drugs and alcohol in the locker rooms. Even back in the day, you go further back, yeah, there was knives. Unfortunately, Bruiser Brody lost his life because of that. So maybe video games is a way to really bring people together and create a safer and healthier locker room. Cool. And they even asked, well, are you gonna get in trouble over that? He said, probably, but I don't care. I'm just speaking the truth. Here's the part that people really need to pay attention to. The fact that it's not so much about the video games, but it's the fact that these wrestlers are looking on the internet and they're looking on Twitter and they're marking out over what we're saying over them. And they're saying, well, they said I had a good match. I believe there was a quote one time where Shawn Michaels brought up the fact that just because you think it was a 5-star match doesn't mean it was. Just because you're getting the chant, this is awesome, doesn't mean it was. And I said, that's a show. I'm going to say that for the real Dwayne Allen. We're going to touch in deeper into that one. And yeah, this is me letting the realness know when he watches this, he'll be like, oh, yeah, let's write that down. But that's the thing. You hear about these wrestlers, and you always hear about them talking about, yeah, man, you see them tweeting about or talking about what they see. As I'm not the biggest fan of Jon Moxley, but one of the facts I do like is the fact that he's not on Twitter. Because like he said, he don't have time for it. And that's the thing about a lot of people. Everybody wants that instant social media gratification. And social media has, quite frankly, given people opinions that don't deserve them. People who don't really understand the industries they're talking about. Everybody knows I'm a Baltimore Ravens fan. Everybody's a quarterback expert. Everybody wants to talk about the fact that Lamar Jackson runs too much when they're not really paying attention to the games. And that's what happens in wrestling. Even a lot of times I go in these clubhouse rooms, right? And I hear these people talk. And I'm like, oh my goodness. Sometimes wrestling conversations can be exhausting. Because when you really pay attention to the business, whatever happened to being a fan? I remember there was a time I would watch a show. And I'm like, that was a good match. Or I just enjoyed it. Because if you think about when you're watching as a child, you was only concerned about one thing, your favorite wrestler winning. Or should I say the good guy winning. That's all you was concerned about. You wasn't concerned about work rate. You wasn't concerned about their gear. You might have been concerned about their gear if you liked it or you didn't. But you wasn't concerned about, I wonder what type of reaction he's getting. And I get everybody thinks they're an intelligent wrestling fan and have a superior wrestling intellect. That's cool. But, whatever happened to that? So that's the thing. I really just sit back and and I've done it too. I know that. But that is the point that people are missing that the Undertaker said. He's talking about these wrestlers being soft because they're marking out over what the fans are saying. So that'll do it for this week's episode of Keepin' It 100. Y'all let me know, what did y'all think? Like I said, I understand where Mark Calloway is coming from, but I also understand where Xavier Woods is coming from. And maybe Undertaker saying, he said what was in his locker room, but he was also saying it caused them to have an edge. And everybody had like a chip on their shoulders. Now we also in a time where WWE isn't fighting for their lives. And that was a time where really they were fighting for their lives, and they had to get to a point where that they created an environment where everybody wanted to go out there and put on their best, right? That's the difference. So, y'all let me know what y'all think in the comments. Like I said, I don't disagree with what the Undertaker's saying at all, but I also don't think, video games in the locker room is a bad thing. I think having soft and sensitive wrestlers, that's the bad thing. Y'all keep it 100. Thank you for tuning in to this week's episode of Break It Down with Brian H. Hit the subscribe button and turn on the bell so you get notified every time the Wrestling Realm posts new content.